From the muddy battlefields of France to the scorching deserts of North Africa, from the jungles of Burma to the hills of Italy, British vehicles played an absolutely crucial role in World War II. These machines carried troops into battle, supported massive offensives, and kept supply lines flowing across every theater of war. In this comprehensive video, we're going to explore every major British vehicle that saw service during the Second World War. We're talking tanks, self-propelled guns, armored cars, carriers, engineering vehicles, trucks, and even motorcycles. It's an incredible collection of engineering innovation, desperate improvisation, and sheer determination. So, buckle up, because this is going to be quite a journey. Light tanks. Let's start with the tanks, and we'll begin with the light tanks that form the reconnaissance backbone of British armored forces. Light Tank Mark VI. The Light Tank Mark VI was the backbone of British armored reconnaissance in the early war years. When Britain declared war in 1939, this was the most numerous tank in British service. It was fast, reaching speeds of up to 35 miles per hour, which made it excellent for scouting and screening operations. The tank featured a two-man crew and was armed with either a .50 caliber and .303 caliber machine gun combination. But here's the tragic reality. It was completely outmatched by German armor during the Battle of France in 1940. Its thin armor, only 14 millimeters at best, couldn't stop even anti-tank rifle fire, let alone proper anti-tank guns. Designed for colonial policing and reconnaissance, it suddenly found itself in frontline combat against panzers. The results were devastating. Despite this, the Mark VI continued in reconnaissance roles throughout the early war years, where its speed remained its greatest asset. Light Tank Mark VII Tetrarch now. This little tank was absolutely fascinating from an engineering perspective. The Tetrarch featured a unique steering mechanism that worked by flexing the tracks themselves, rather than using traditional clutch and brake systems. This gave it exceptional maneuverability for its size. But what made the Tetrarch truly special was that it was air-portable. In fact, it was the first British tank specifically designed to be carried by glider. This made it invaluable for airborne operations. The Tetrarch saw its most famous action during Operation Tonga on D-Day, when they were landed by Hamilcar gliders to support the British 6th Airborne Division. Armed with a 2-pounder gun, it provided much-needed armor support for lightly equipped paratroopers. Infantry tanks. British tank doctrine in the 1930s split tanks into two categories: infantry tanks for supporting foot soldiers and cruiser tanks for exploitation and mobile warfare. Let's look at the infantry tanks first. Infantry tank Mark I Matilda, and talk about basic design. The Matilda Markian was the epitome of 1930s infantry tank thinking. Heavy armor, slow speed, and minimal armament. It could barely manage 8 miles per hour and was armed with nothing but a single machine gun. The two-man crew was cramped, and the commander had to do everything except drive. Its thick armor of up to 60 millimeters made it nearly impervious to most anti-tank weapons of 1940, which gave it some utility during the Battle of France. But without a proper anti-tank gun, it couldn't effectively engage enemy armor. It was a dinosaur almost from the moment it entered service. A clear example of how the rapid pace of tank development in the late 1930s could make designs obsolete incredibly quickly. Infantry tank Mark II Matilda Thecket. Now this was the queen of the desert in the early North African campaign. The Matilda Mark II was a completely different beast from its predecessor. It was heavily armored with up to 78 mm of protection, making it nearly impervious to Italian tanks and early German anti-tank guns. During Operation Compass in late 1940 and early 1941, Matilda the Sins absolutely devastated Italian forces. They were described as shielded monsters that Italian shells simply bounced off. Even the Germans had trouble with them initially. The Matilda II was armed with a respectable 2-pounder gun, which, while not powerful by later standards, was adequate for 1940 to 41. The tank earned legendary status among its crews for its reliability and protection. Its greatest weakness was its slow speed of only 15 miles per hour, which limited its tactical flexibility. Eventually, better German anti-tank guns and the arrival of the Afrika Korps made the Matilda vulnerable, but for a crucial period, it dominated North African battlefields. Valentine, all marks. The Valentine was quite possibly the most important British tank of the entire war, at least in terms of numbers and versatility. Over 8,000 were produced, making it one of the most numerous British tanks ever built. It served with distinction in North Africa, Italy, and the Soviet Union, where it was well regarded by Soviet crews. The Valentine was designed as a private venture by Vickers Armstrong and adopted for service in 1940. It featured reliable mechanical components, relatively thick armor for its class, and was armed initially with a 2-pounder, later upgraded to a 6-pounder, and even a 75mm gun in later marks. What made the Valentine truly special was its adaptability. The chassis became the basis for numerous specialized variants and self-propelled guns. Soviet forces received over 3,000 Valentines through Lend-Lease, and they appreciated its reliability in the harsh Russian climate. While not the most glamorous tank, the Valentine was dependable, and in war, that counts for everything. Churchill, all marks what a magnificent machine the Churchill was. Initially designed in the panic of 1940, when invasion seemed imminent, the Churchill became one of Britain's most successful tank designs. It featured tremendously thick armor, up to 152mm in later variants, making it one of the most heavily protected Allied tanks of the war. The Churchill was loved by its crews, particularly for its superb cross-country performance. Its long track run and multiple small road wheels gave it incredible climbing ability and obstacle crossing capability. It could climb steep slopes that would defeat almost any other tank. The Churchill went through numerous marks during the war with constant improvements. Early versions suffered from an underpowered 2-pounder or 6-pounder gun, but later marks featured the excellent 75mm gun. The Mark 7, introduced in 1944, was especially formidable with its heavy armor and improved armament. The Churchill also became the basis for numerous specialized vehicles, which we'll discuss later. It served from North Africa through Sicily, Italy, and Northwest Europe, proving its worth in every theater. Cruiser tanks. While infantry tanks supported foot soldiers, cruiser tanks were Britain's answer to mobile armored warfare. Let's examine the main cruiser tanks. Cruiser Mark IV. The cruiser Mark IV introduced the famous Christie suspension system to British service. This revolutionary suspension, licensed from American designer Walter Christie, used large road wheels and allowed for much higher speeds. The Mark IV could reach 30 miles per hour, making it genuinely fast for its era. It saw extensive action in France in 1940 and the early desert campaigns. Armed with a 2-pounder gun and protected by thin armor, it exemplified the British cruiser philosophy: speed and firepower over protection. This would prove problematic as German anti-tank capabilities improved. Cruiser Mark VI Crusader. The Crusader was the defining British tank of the Desert War's peak period from 1941 to 1943. It was fast, relatively well armed with either a 2-pounder or later a 6-pounder gun, and produced in Salters. Large numbers, over 5,000 were built, but oh boy did it have problems. The Crusader suffered from notoriously poor mechanical reliability. In the harsh desert environment, engines overheated, tracks broke, and cooling systems failed. It wasn't uncommon for Crusader units to have half their tanks out of action due to mechanical breakdowns rather than enemy action. Despite these issues, it remained the primary British cruiser tank through crucial battles like Operation Crusader and the Second Battle of El Alamein. The Cromwell represented a quantum leap forward in British tank design. Introduced in 1943, it finally gave British armored divisions a tank that was fast, reliable, and decently armed. The secret was the magnificent Rolls-Royce Meteor engine, a D-rated version of the Merlin aircraft engine that powered Spitfires and Hurricanes. With 600 horsepower on tap, the Cromwell could reach speeds of up to 40 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest tanks of the war. It was armed with a 75mm gun and had reasonable armor protection. The Cromwell equipped British armored divisions during the Normandy campaign and the advance across Northwest Europe in 1944-45. Crews loved the Cromwell for its speed and reliability. Finally, British tanks could match German vehicles for mechanical dependability while offering superior mobility. The Comet was arguably the finest British tank of the entire Second World War. Arriving in late 1944, it came too late to see extensive action, but where it did fight, it excelled. The Comet mounted the excellent 77mm high-velocity gun, which was actually a 3-inch gun rebored to use 17-pounder ammunition. This gave it the ability to defeat German Panthers and Tigers at reasonable combat ranges. Combined with the reliable Meteor engine, good armor protection, and excellent mobility, the Comet was a genuinely world-class tank. Had it arrived a year earlier, it might have significantly impacted the campaign in Northwest Europe. As it was, Comets served into the 1950s, seeing action in the Korean War. Sherman Firefly. The Firefly deserves special mention as Britain's answer to German heavy tanks, taking the American M4 Sherman and fitting it with the powerful 17-pounder anti-tank gun, created one of the most feared Allied tanks of the war. The 17-pounder could penetrate the armor of Panthers and Tigers, finally giving British and Commonwealth tank units a weapon that could reliably defeat German heavy armor. The conversion was brilliant improvisation. The 17-pounder was a massive gun, and fitting it into the Sherman's turret required ingenuity. The result was a tank that German tank commanders learned to fear and prioritize as targets. Fireflies were distributed to tank troops, typically one per troop of 4 tanks, providing crucial anti-tank capability. Self-propelled guns. Self-propelled artillery and tank destroyers gave British forces mobile fire support. Let's examine the main types. Bishop. 25-pounder SPG. The Bishop was an early attempt at mounting the standard British 25-pounder field gun on a mobile chassis. Using the Valentine tank as a basis, engineers created what looked like a small armored box. Unfortunately, the design had severe limitations. The gun mounting provided very poor elevation, limiting the Bishop's range significantly. It saw service in North Africa but was generally considered unsuccessful and was phased out after the North African campaign ended. Deacon's 6-pounder SP, now here, was creative problem-solving under pressure. The Deacon took a 6-pounder anti-tank gun and mounted it high on an AEC Matador truck chassis with armored shields. The result was an awkward-looking but functional mobile anti-tank platform. It provided mobile punch against Axis armored cars and light vehicles in the desert. While ungainly, it served a real need during a critical period. Archer 17-pounder SP. The Archer was genuinely clever design. Take the powerful 17-pounder. Anti-tank gun, mount it facing backward on a Valentine chassis, and you have a highly effective tank destroyer. The rear-facing gun might seem odd, but it actually made tactical sense. The Archer could drive into position, fire, and immediately retreat without having to turn around. A true shoot and scoot capability that protected crews during engagement. The Archer proved highly effective in Northwest Europe, providing British units with mobile anti-tank firepower capable of dealing with Panthers and Tigers. Its low profile made it easy to conceal, and the 17-pounder's punch made it deadly. Armored cars and scout vehicles. Britain produced an impressive array of wheeled armored vehicles for reconnaissance and security duties. Daimler armored car. Many consider the Daimler the finest Allied armored car of the war. It featured excellent armor protection, good speed, and was armed with a 2-pounder gun in a small turret. The Daimler's 4-wheel drive and low profile made it an excellent reconnaissance vehicle. It served in every theater where British forces fought. Humber armored car. The Humber was the most widely produced British heavy armored car, with over 5,000 built. Reliable, sturdy, and mounting either a 15mm or 37mm gun, Humbers served on virtually every front. They proved particularly valuable for reconnaissance and security operations. Daimler Scout Car, Dingo. The Dingo was utterly essential for British reconnaissance. This compact 4-wheel drive vehicle featured 4-wheel steering, making it incredibly agile. A Dingo could pivot in its own length, making it nearly impossible to trap in tight spots. Its low silhouette and speed made it perfect for scouting ahead of armored formations. Carriers. The Universal Carrier deserves special recognition as the most ubiquitous British tracked vehicle of the war. Universal Carrier. Often called the Bren Gun Carrier, the Universal Carrier was produced in enormous numbers, over 100,000 units. Small, versatile tracked vehicles did everything, carrying infantry sections, towing anti-tank guns, hauling supplies, serving as artillery observation posts, and even mounting mortars. They were truly universal, fast, maneuverable, and relatively cheap to produce. Universal carriers served with Commonwealth forces worldwide. The Wasp variant mounted a flamethrower, proving terrifyingly effective against bunkers and fortifications. Specialized vehicles. British ingenuity truly shone in specialized armored vehicles, particularly those developed for D-Day. Churchill AV AVRE, the Armored Vehicle. Royal Engineers, or AVRE, was a combat engineering tank based on the Churchill. It mounted a massive 290mm petard spigot mortar that fired a 40-pound demolition charge nicknamed the Flying Dustbin. This weapon could destroy concrete fortifications, pillboxes, and other obstacles. AVREs were absolutely essential during the Normandy landings for clearing beach obstacles and fortifications. Churchill Crocodile. Perhaps the most terrifying weapon on the battlefield was the Crocodile flamethrower tank. It towed an armored trailer containing flame fuel and could project fire up to 120 yards. The psychological effect on enemy troops was devastating. German soldiers greatly feared crocodiles, and their presence often led to immediate surrenders. From the humble motorcycle dispatch rider to the mighty Churchill tank, British vehicles formed the backbone of Commonwealth military operations throughout World War II. These machines represented British industrial might, engineering innovation, and the determination to prevail against tyranny. While not always the most advanced or powerful vehicles on the battlefield, British vehicles were generally reliable, adaptable, and produced in sufficient numbers to get the job done. They carried British and Commonwealth forces to victory across 3 continents and countless battlefields. The legacy of these vehicles lives on in museums, collections, and in the memories of the veterans who relied on them in humanity's darkest hour.